Right, Andrew, what a pleasure to have you with us here at ProDog Raw. And I've been really looking forward to this for many, many weeks. And of course, you are Andrew Hale of Train Positive. And you've got a huge following and reputation, nearly enough sort of worldwide.
And thank you for having me, Caroline. Just to let everybody know, I'm here with six dogs. Got three Afghans here, two Labradors, and a collie. See, they call it. So if it suddenly seems very animated with dogs, especially dogs that look like polar bears, that's because it's the Afghans. Yeah, I think so. I've got I work with behaviour like yourself, and I've got a human psychology background, which has helped really inform a lot of the things that I think about now in what I do. And for a long time, I think we've had a very kind of task based, compliance based approach to our relationship with dogs. This notion that we teach them all the stuff they need to know and they do it. But when we start thinking about the emotional experience, which we'll unpack a little bit today, I love the emotional experience as a lens because there's two things about the emotional experience. So the emotional experience, by the way, is how we as an individual process how we feel, how we're affected by different things, our resilience to certain things, how robust we are around certain things. We're all kind of products of our genetics, our early learning, secure, insecure attachments, trauma, all these things help with the filters, our perception, if you like, of the world around us, and of course, our perception of self, of course. So that's the emotional experience, how we as an individual experience things. There's two things about the emotional experience. First of all, is we all have one. So you have one, I have one, your dog has one, the cat has one, the horse has one. Now, often in the past, we've had this notion of, well, we kind of know that animals might feel stuff, but we don't know how they think and feel. So we'll forget that bit and we'll just focus on what their behavior does. That's been the general narrative. But the point here, the second bit of the emotional experience is the important bit for me. And that is that it's unique to us as individuals. So the only emotional experience I can truly validate for is my own. So the point there is, Caroline, I don't know how you think and feel. So should I ignore that then and just make you do things based on my version of safety, my narrative, my belief system, my value systems? So this is not just about our relationship with dogs. It's a wider topic
Yeah.
because we're all indoctrinated into a construct that's we call the good-bad continuum, this notion that somehow behavior is good through neutral through bad, and that therefore we must try and reward the good and either ignore or punish the bad. And that's what we're heavily indoctrinated in, so much so that we don't even question it, right? Because we want more of the good and we want less of the bad. And that makes sense. Hence the fact we have a very task-orientated, transactional relationship with our dogs.
Yeah, and
But
I find quite, sorry to butt in, but quite robotic in nature, asking anybody to do something the way you want them to do it rather than letting them find their own way with support.
yes, and I think that's a big thing that we have to look at in society, of course, because there's a lot of pressure on us to conform to those kind of societal norms, which we can come on to in a second, actually. But the point I was going to say there about the good bad continuum, when you ask a very simple question, which is who's deciding what's good or bad and what motivates those narratives, and how representative is that narrative regarding the other's care and support needs, we now start to have that unravel a little bit. And you're right. I think if we all had to behave exactly the same way, based on exactly the same metric, it would be a bit boring. Anyway, a bit of a boring word, but also it's not achievable because on the flip side of that argument, people will say, well, hang on, you've got to have rules, you've got to have boundaries. Boundaries are important, but they shouldn't be barriers to unmet need. And that's what happens a lot. So if you have a societal norm, an expectation, and by the way, expectation is about control. I want people to really think about that. If you expect something of another, you are seeking to control outcome, regardless of their ability to do it. And that's an important point because if you have the privilege of good genetics, minimal trauma, secure attachments, all the good stuff, then you're more likely to be able to fit a norm. Great. But if not, then it's going to be harder. So I use a good example here. If you imagine little Johnny, he's in school today. That's a huge achievement for him that he's even there, because he hasn't had breakfast, or he didn't sleep, or he's traumatized about what's going on at home. So that's an achievement for him. But because of that, he's not in the right physiological state to do learning and attain what is expected of him from that environment, including his behavioral output, because he's more likely to be fidgety, bored, whatever. Now, because of that metric of good, bad stuff, he's going to be labeled as being difficult, disruptive, and he's now disenfranchised from learning. So this is why I'm just really keen to think about the emotional experience, emotional safety will impact that, not just for our dogs, but for us, and how it affects us actually over time. I think about I'm part of the LGBTQ community. I'm married to my husband, been married 10 years, surrounded by lots of love, amazing. 60 years ago, I could have gone to prison for that love just because some other part of society decided that need, that social need, that connection was bad.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's all about understanding that everybody is different, every individual is different. And I saw a lovely thing on Facebook today, actually. It's bringing up a child. It's not about expectations. It's not to help a child be successful. It's and integrate into the world. It's about helping the child feel safe, feel nurtured, feel supported and guided. So when they're ready, they can be the best they can be without being pushed into something you want them to be.
And that's the real essence of it, isn't it, Caroline? Because I think we can all think about ourselves, to a lesser or greater extent, about how much of our own detachment from self is because of the judgments and expectations of others, and how we're kind of molded into these kind of versions of ourselves that actually, when we get older, we find difficult to square those circles, actually. And that's where we end up with a lot of emotional and mental health challenges, of course. And I think when we start thinking about behavior differently, especially with dogs, the two main areas I think that we really need to challenge some of the received wisdoms that have been around and kind of rethink things differently is how we bring dogs up in the first place, what happens in that first 12 months, and how we support dogs who are really struggling, those dogs who we might colloquially call reactive or aggressive. Because that's what I work with. I just work with that type of dog, and about half of my caseload are dogs that would be classed as dangerous, I guess. And they're dangerous because they're not feeling heard. They don't feel safe, and this is the key. But especially in that first 12 months, Caroline, I think we have to, for me, there's only two things I really want a young dog to learn. The first is that they have a voice. I really want that young dog to know they have a voice, that they can communicate, however that communication might be. And secondly, that we will have learnt enough from them first, which is the shift I think that's happening, because that's the difference between a care approach to a task approach. Care approach is more, let's learn from the other first and then build up. Is to learn from them enough about how they need to navigate the world around them and make sure that we try and support them so they have enough time to process, that they can engage on their terms, that they can find exits when they need them. So as you say there, they're more likely to learn to regulate better themselves. And then they're in a much better position for us to train anything we like. We can train anything we like them because they're more open to that now, because their own internal intrinsic needs are met first.
Yeah, it's about building blocks, isn't it? It's about sort of making them feel safe, secure. So then they want to, it's a cycle that heal and be with me kind of training and recall. Now, if you're the person they look to and they trust and they want to be with, and you've got a great bond, you don't need recall because they're there already. And walking next to you, they're going to be doing that. So putting so much pressure on one so young, we try and make puppies into adults before as you say, we've learnt about them, and before they've gone through the process of growing up and gone through all those teenage moments and things that we have to help them through. So yeah. So how much importance should we put on how we feel around, well, anybody, our dogs, as we call dogs, in order for them to feel safe and feel that they can be themselves with us?
That's a really good question, because I think what we want our dogs to feel is that we are their return to safety. Because that's kind of what you're implying there, especially about, I'm not sure about this, I think I'll go back to dad, I want to connect that, and that building that more relational model. And actually, that on a deeper level, we have to then think about our own relationship with ourselves in that, because perception truly is everything, and how we perceive the world around us, how we perceive our dog, how we perceive that relationship will go a long way to driving our responses. And I think we were talking off air a little bit about when we start to think about having a mindset shift away from just making a dog do something because we tell them to one more of thinking, what do you need? Maybe I need to put your needs ahead of mine sometimes. That does require a mindset shift that often needs a little bit of navigating. We have the 3 A's in human therapy that I talk about regarding us supporting clients.
Yeah.
Awareness, acknowledgement, acceptance. The first one is the important one. I feel, Caroline, that's our job. Our job, actually, when we turn up, is to support the caregiver's awareness of their animal's lived experience. Because quite often when we meet them, they're stuck in task. They feel, well, I've got to stop my dog pulling, got to stop my dog barking, got to whatever it is, or I've got to get my dog to do something. And they're likely to have been influenced by a lot of the stuff on telly, and especially the obedience, dominance stuff. So we have to support their awareness, and that involves a bit of awareness for themselves, actually. So I think that can be a challenge, and especially acknowledgement. So they might start off by thinking, well, my dog's doing this because they're being dominant, or they're being willful, or they're being whatever we want to label, and then we support their awareness, and they think, oh, well, maybe my dog isn't that. Maybe it's because my dog's stressed, or maybe it's because my dog's not coping. There can be all sorts of barriers to why it can be hard for them to acknowledge that. Guilt being a big one. We must recognise guilt. I'll reference guilt a little bit now because it's an important one. Quite often somebody so when they think, okay, now that I'm more aware of this, I now feel guilty because of what I used to do. And it's very easy to say to somebody, oh, don't feel guilty. But I don't think that's very helpful, because we shouldn't be saying to anybody, don't feel anything. What we have to invite people to do is to think about their relationship with those feelings. So guilt's a good one. Guilt, if we allow it to, will keep us chained to the past. But guess what? We can't go back to the past. So instead, this is what I invite my clients to do. If they have that little block, that feeling we have, that deep visceral feeling that guilt gives us, see that as a really important bit of learning that you've done, and to recognize that now you can choose to have that drive your response in the future. That unshackles us from the past and means that we can know better, do better. That's the point. So it's changing our relationship with that feeling, not dismissing it. And then once we get to acknowledgement, if we can get to acceptance, that's where best outcomes come.
Yeah, absolutely. And also to explain to people that they all dearly love their dogs. They've all done the best they possibly can with the information they've been given in the past. And they've reached out to people like you and me because they need to change, because what they've done in the past hasn't worked, and they've acknowledged that. So it is, you could have quite an emotional discussion, can't you, actually, at a lot of these confrontations, and people's realization that they've probably gone down the wrong route, but it's with the best intentions.
And that's why it's really important that we create that foundated safety in that relationship.
Yeah.
There's no point starting our relationship saying, oh, well, we don't say that anymore, and, that tool's wrong, and everything, because already now they're not going to feel safe with us. And we were talking about emotional safety earlier. Emotional safety has two parts to it. One is feeling safe to even feel.
Yes.
We've all found ourselves in a situation where we've somehow felt that our feelings were not valid. But more importantly, in relation to dogs, because the dogs, this is relevant to dogs too, is feeling safe to communicate how you feel. For a lot of dogs, that's hard if they're being corrected all the time, right? And nobody wants to feel corrected. We all want to feel heard. And that's the biggest thing that you and I have to do, is we have to meet our clients where they are, and we have to allow them to feel heard. Because, I remember my mother, when I kind of came out with information about my sexualized trauma as a child, and that I didn't talk about that until my late 20s with my family, and that's when I had my breakdown and everything else. But my mother was really distraught because she looked back and she felt that she could have done things differently or whatever else. That's the kind of mother as well. And I think that's what we do when we have these reappraisals in life, when we learn more and we look at different things. And and our clients, like you say, the vast majority of our clients, and I can't really think of anybody who doesn't care, but maybe there's some, but the vast majority, they do care. It's just that they've been indoctrinated in this notion of task. That's why many do things. Here you go. Here's a polar bear for you. Hello.
Oh, gorgeous.
Looks like Gandalf.
My little one's asleep under my desk here.
Easy pups.
Yeah.
And when you're stuck in task, you see, this is the point. When you're stuck in a task mindset, you can end up doing things that actually internally feel a bit uncomfortable, but in your head you think, if only the behavior would stop, everything would be okay.
Yeah.
And there's a saying in human psychology that the path to coercion is often laid with good intention.
Yeah.
I think that's quite a powerful thing.
Yeah.
So we have to make sure that we meet our clients, and we've all been there. Oh my God, I think about when I was kind of in my teens and some of our early dogs and the whole Barbara Woodhouse stuff and choke chains and that, and you do what you see at the time, and because we're all kind of a victim really of a very conformist model of how you're supposed to be, it can be hard to see away from that, because that would mean us seeing away from some of our own experiences.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's this notion about dogs being stubborn or naughty or misbehaving. How do we change a person's mindset on seeing this as something different?
So I think we all find our own different ways of doing this. I think for me, the emotional experience is the way that I like to look at things, because, like we discussed earlier, that we all have one. So I always, when I first start with a client, I want to hear their emotional experience. I want to hear how it affects them. I want to hear why they're using these tools, what it does, what they feel that their objective is, what it is they are seeking to do. I just really want them to feel heard, but I need to be really aware of that, truly aware of that. That's why I've got my CAKE acronym, which helps us actually. So CAKE, because we all love cake, right? So we take CAKE. So CAKE is compassion, awareness, knowledge, and empathy. So compassion is really important because that helps me to navigate my own judgments. Our brain is designed to judge. We love to judge. And we love to have quick, what we call cognitive appraisals, based on very flimsy information often.
Yeah.
We all love to judge. We all hate to be judged because we know our own individual experiences are complicated one. But we love to judge. So we can't not judge, but we can change our relationship. I'll be saying that a lot because that's what it's about. It's about how we change our relationship with stuff. We can change our relationship with our judgments and not let them drive our response. So I might see that intake form and I might see loads of stuff on there that I think, oh, my internal judgy voice is thinking, oh, bloody hell, that's tough on the dog. Compassion means that despite any of those judgments, I'll turn up anyway. I'm going to turn up anyway. So compassion is not about condoning, being permissive or anything like that. It is about thinking I'll turn up anyway. Awareness, I need to be as aware as I can of their lived experience, and seek knowledge from them rather than thinking I'm the one with the knowledge, because it's very easy to say, right, we're going to do this, this, and this. This is what you must do. I know loads of stuff you don't.
Yeah.
So I want to actively seek knowledge from them, and then I'm more likely to be empathetic. And then empathy really is about being available to the lived experience of another. But this is why professional boundaries are important, ensuring that we remember we're not responsible for it. Not responsible for it, but I can be available to. So then they feel heard. Great. Now I can introduce the emotional experience in a more neutral way. So I use a couple of analogies. So doors of the brain analogy is one of them, because I talk about how important processing is. The more sensitive you are, the more time you need to process stuff. And if we imagine the brain having lots of little doors in it, We need as many doors to stay open for the brain to have a chance at processing well, for that sensory integration process to work efficiently. So sensory integration is just how our brain takes on information through our sensory system and tries to make sense of it. And then tell them invite them to consider pain, trauma, stress. Excitement is stress, as far as I'm concerned, are big door closers. And the first doors that are likely to close for a dog are the doors that we put training behind, because they're likely to have little internal value to the dog. The doors that are likely to stay open are survival doors. And I can say to them, that's the same for us, right? We can all recognize that if we haven't got enough doors open, we can't think straight. We're more likely to be impulsive. And then talk about the nervous system using the good old bucket analogy. The more that's in the bucket, the less doors we have open, the less chance of that mindful response, more chance of a reflexive automatic one. Again, I can say, look, that situation you told me about down the beach with the dog, I bet your bucket was pretty full. And I bet you said and did things at the moment that when later on, when you had more doors open, you felt more apologetic or whatever for. So they now have a point of reference. And I underpin all that with what I feel is the most important word in the psychology of behavior. Right up there with safety is the word relief. Because when that bucket fills, when we feel those negative things, physical pain, emotional pain, social pain, our body wants us to do something to get relief for it. That's the whole point of having those uncomfortable feelings. That's why we need to change our relationship with a lot of those uncomfortable feelings, not push them away and think, okay, what's that telling me? What relief do I seek? And most challenging behaviors in dogs are actually relief seeking. But guess what? The client wants relief too. So I think this is the thing, Caroline. It's joining us together with a common language. We don't have to kind of create new words or stuff. It's just like, the dog is likely doing this response, and I prefer the word response to reaction, because they don't feel safe, because they're nervous, because their bucket's too full, because they don't have enough doors open. And remind them things like you referenced earlier. We know now that more modulating part of the brain in dogs doesn't even start coming online till about 18 months. So some of those doors aren't even open yet. Yeah. Trauma, nothing shuts doors like trauma. These dogs that we see who are deeply traumatized, like the wonderful Rachel Leather says, who's a trauma expert, you can't teach safety because the animal has to feel it. And that's only when the nervous system believes it. Do you see? So I think this is a good way of working because it brings people along. And also I get a vibe back from them. Remember, awareness, acknowledgement, acceptance, about what might be the sticking points about acknowledging some of this. And that's often because of their own trauma, their own conditioning but there must be a consequence. Or, I remember one lady saying to me, well, I get all that, but I was brought up that you can feel how you want, but you just don't show it.
Right, yes.
So that's a powerful blocker, right? When you're thinking about supporting another. And that's one little point there for the professionals listening. We can't always support people to navigate through awareness, acknowledgement, acceptance. And that's okay from us as a professional. We shouldn't feel that, because we can't make somebody feel or see the world differently. It has to be an invitation. We have to support them through that. And that's why ultimately acceptance is the best outcome. Because that also, and this has been shown in a lot of kind of meta-analysis studies of surveys with parents who have children with special support needs. They often saw their child's behaviours as being difficult, challenging, naughty, tantrumy, whatever, because that's what they were told by others. Then they get supported by a professional through awareness, acknowledgement, and then acceptance of their child's diagnosis, if you like, or at least their kind of understanding. That's more likely to now unlock the advocacy part of the brain. And that's what you and I see with our clients. When they get to accept and say, right, I accept my dog now, I see that, they're more likely to advocate now. And that's what happens. So if you have that child who used to maybe have to have a bit of a meltdown, and you used to be very aware of the judgments of others and all the pressures that come, like you say, family and friends and somebody you don't even know in the street. Now advocacy is your shield to that, because it's like, I don't give a damn what you think. I will hold space for my child. I will hold space for my dog.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it's kind of looking at them as that individual, and just because you want to do something, you've got these high expectations of what you want to do with your dog, whether that's going out into the malls or into a coffee shop, into a pub, walking through town, what have you, it might not be what is going to suit that individual character. And you have to change your ideas of what you saw in your rose tinted glasses when you first took on a puppy or took on a new dog, and just have an open mind and eke them in slowly and see their response to all the different stimuli that are coming fast and furious, but also those stimuli that we don't even see, we don't even sense, because we haven't got a nose like a dog.
Yes. Yes, and that's a really good point there about something else we have to support people to navigate is those ideals, is that kind of picture of what those expectations again, I guess.
Yeah.
And there's almost a grieving process there sometimes. But this isn't, again, it's not all these things. We could easily be talking about children. People might have a view.
Absolutely.
We're going to do this. My parents wanted, I'm sure, me to be married and have kids, and both of them wanted me to become a solicitor and all that kind of stuff. I ended up doing none of those things. But they adapted those expectations. I think the biggest antidote to expectation is gratitude. Taking a breath and being thankful for the reality you have, not the one that you're missing. But that can take some navigating sometimes. And we have dogs for all sorts of reasons, right? Very few people in my experience have a dog just because they're going to invite a dog into their lives and we're going to have a relationship. It's because they've already thought they might want to do sport with them. They want them for companionship because they want to go out more. They want to go down the park. They want to go down the pub, or whatever it is that we perceive. And we have to recognize that's fine, but that is a huge amount to put onto another living being that didn't read the memo.
Yeah. But you see, lots of people haven't read that memo either, because I'm not one that, likes to go into London on a tube, going for meetings. I have to go with somebody because I can't deal with it. Because, I've just been away for the weekend to Amsterdam. It was very nice, thank you, but far too many people. And I'm so glad to be home. So just because, and probably I should have said, no, thank you very much. But going with the flow, trying to please everybody else. And that's what we've got to stop doing, trying to please everybody around us. Because, as you say, people are so judgmental. How do you teach people or advise people how, when others around them are so judgmental about their pulling dog or their barking dog or whatever is going on with their dog that doesn't sit with their next door neighbour or their family member? How do we help people change their mindset and going, actually, this is my child, my dog, my business. I'm doing my best. I've got support.
I think that comes back to that awareness, acknowledgement, acceptance, and then trying to get to advocacy, because that is a big shield then. Because our little seeds of doubt in our brain, how many people do we work with who instinctively feel the connection they need to make with their dog, but they're almost prevented from because of other people's voices? And you and I almost give them permission to listen to their own. And that's challenging, though, because this is a bigger topic, of course, Caroline. When we think about how we're all, from a very young age, our sense of self, our sense of self-worth doesn't change. Our worth never changes, but our value of it does, often based on the narratives of others. That teacher at school who says you're not good enough, that whatever. And what we've got to remember is this is really important, especially for professionals listening in, when we talk a lot about having boundaries. There is a side effect, if you like, byproduct of having good boundaries that you enforce well, and that is other people won't like it. And if you are particularly sensitive to social rejection, you are going to end up with very porous boundaries, because you'll end up sooner people pleasing than actually thinking, no, I need to listen to this. So this is the same for our clients. When I run emotional health workshops for professionals, which is actually understanding the psychology of judgments and expectations and all these kind of things, because when we understand them, we can support others and ourselves more. Our brain is literally designed to seek safe, secure attachment. And we have now identified that the part of the brain that deals with social pain and social rejection shares the same neural area as physical pain. So it hurts. We also know that if you experience chronic social rejection, loneliness, that two really, Dr. Stephen Cole at UCLA, and another gentleman that I can't quite remember his name, but they've done all this research. This isn't a little background there. So Stephen Cole got interested in this because he looked at the data around men with HIV and found that men who were in the closet and not living authentic, rich social lives were more likely to succumb to it quicker than those gay men who lived authentic social lives. That's what got him thinking about this stuff. So they've done all this research now, and now they've proven that chronic social rejection does two things. One, it dials down our kind of genetic response to antivirals, especially social viruses, because the brain's saying, hang on, I'm isolated, so I don't need to protect myself against these social bugs. And our inflammation system gets dialed up. So this is why people who experience chronic loneliness are 25% more likely to have strokes, more likely to have illnesses. So this is important and it's relevant because there's something called social evaluative threat that underpins all this stuff. We are really attuned to the threat of social rejection. Even somebody saying something to you like, Caroline, can I give you some advice? It's likely to set that part of the brain off, right? Because you think, hang on, you're saying I'm different to you because I don't know. So actually for our clients then, if their dog's lunging and barking at the dog, they are deeply affected by that because of not just the embarrassment and everything else. It's because of the fear of rejection and their judgment of them. So this is powerful stuff. So it is difficult and it is hard. And that's why many people are motivated. If I can just stop that, we'll all be happy. So I totally get it. So that's why we have to take our clients on that journey, or try to, through awareness, acknowledgement, acceptance, because it's hard if not. It's really hard if not. And you'll end up, if they don't fully go through that journey, they're likely to do things when we're around that they're not likely to do when we're not. We have to be better at, so especially on our side of the fence, where we put a lot of emphasis on science, what science tells us, the objective. That is important. But we also have to be better at embracing the subjective and the anecdotal. In other words, a study of one, which is that dog, because that's where the richness of the individual lived experience lies. And I think we owe it to the dog. Caroline, you were saying about your own consults and how you kind of construct them when we're chatting off air, because we owe it to that dog to share as much of their survival story as possible. You know, if a dog doesn't seem to navigate other dogs very well, that's only a bit of their dog's life. That's the bit that's presenting the challenges, I know. But there is a richness in that animal's life that we can learn from away from that context, that can actually help us to think, you know, I've got my learn, support, teach mantra, which is learn from the dog first, give the dog a chance to tell their story. I see behavior like painting a picture. I want that dog to paint that picture for me, and I want to resist the temptation to keep grabbing the brush all the time and feeling that I can paint it better for them. Yeah. Learn from the dog first, support what I've learned about how they process, how they want to engage, how they want to exit. And then if I'm going to teach anything, try and teach things that I feel are more likely to stay behind doors that are going to stay open, because they're innately useful for that dog regarding safety and relief. After that, we can train what we like. The traditional approach, I say traditional, forget about punishment, but even reinforcement, the traditional thing is to somehow modify behavior, create new behaviors. We have to recognize, and this is a challenge, I think, for positive trainers, some positive trainers, recognize the coercive potential in reinforcement. Just because we can get another behavior because it's a powerful tool, doesn't mean necessarily that animal still feels any safer or is getting relief. We're just getting a behavior because we can. And I think that's something we've just got to question. So that's the whole thing about the dog-centered care platform that I've created, really to provide as many conversations as possible about thinking about what goes beyond the normal operant modes of practice. The important word there is beyond. I recognize that some people have kind of pitched me as being part of some kind of anti-training movement, and I very much reject that. I see training as being neutral because it just is. However, why we do it, how we do it, and ultimately how it affects the dog will be the judge of that, whether it was good or bad. Training itself isn't the problem. The problem is, though, just making dogs do stuff all the time. That's that task-oriented approach. If we're stuck in task, it doesn't mean we don't care. But if you are only looking at getting tasks done, you have to care less then about the feedback you're getting, because you've got to get tasks done. And punishment is the ultimate manifestation of task at all costs. That's it. A care approach doesn't mean we're not looking again. I do consultancy work for some of the large assistance dog charities, and that's a dog that has to do a task, and an important one. But what we're learning is that task is more likely to get done by that dog if that dog is physically and emotionally well regulated.
Yeah,
so that's a care approach first. Care first, task will follow.
Yeah, in a relaxed state, in a peaceful state of mind, you're going to learn, you're going to retain information, and you'll be able to do the more difficult stuff that's not what a dog would teach another dog. But talking about sort of dogs, you would say modifying behavior. If you give them the right information, they will change their own behavior, a canine form of communication, as opposed to us saying, no, you don't do this, you do this. So helping them make a better canine choice is so important for them to feel confident. And it's like you and I. If someone says, no, you don't do it that way, you do it that way. Well, my way, what I did just worked. Just because you would do it a different way doesn't mean to say you're any better than me. But trying to get someone to conform to the way you are and how you do a human task, it can make you feel unworthy, can't it?
God, definitely. And this is the thing about emotional safety again, and social safety. I think we've all found ourselves under pressure to do things a certain way, even though we didn't feel safe doing it, or we felt uncomfortable doing it, but we had to do it anyway. I'm lucky I have a good boss now, because it's me. But we've all been in situations where we've had to kind of comply, and we've had to do things. And I say the thing is, it's not about us not having rules and boundaries and the rule of law and social decency and all this kind of stuff. We need some element of social cohesion, but we have to understand the ability of some to fulfill that, and how bad it and how difficult it can be. So I get put in situations quite often that I feel uncomfortable with, but in those situations, I'm kind of robust enough to kind of, it's okay. But there's other situations that deeply affect me, actually, and I find them quite traumatic. And then I have to deal with the consequences of that.
Yeah.
Whilst, so I think we can all relate to this stuff, Caroline. And,
yeah,
and I think, especially from a young age there, it's such a heavy, the general public have been let down hugely by a narrative that has told them the most important thing is a well-trained, obedient dog. Because they know how to teach sit, but they don't know what pain looks like. They don't know what stress looks like. They don't know what body language is. They don't know about development stages. And I think, and then if they ask their dog to do something and they don't, they see their dog as being disobedient, willful, stubborn, all the things you talked about earlier. And so it's just relationship breaking. It's not relationship supporting.
Yeah.
We have to be better as professionals, especially on our side of the fence. I think we do a disservice by keep trying to argue about how well to do task.
Yeah.
We need to know that we can move away from that now, leave that to those who want to just make tasks. We need to think, how can we provide a better education to the general public about care and how that supports task? Because it's a different way of looking at it. We don't have to get involved in all those arguments anymore.
Yeah.
Because the general public think, well, you're just telling me how to do task nicer. And he's telling me how to do task quicker.
Yeah. It's building a firm foundation of trust, love, care, and all those lovely things you're talking about. But how to help a dog live naturally in a really unnatural environment?
Well, that's it. And I think this is a key thing, isn't it? And I think there's been a big emphasis on this notion that, somehow the dog has to live in the human world, therefore they must learn how to do that based on that world.
Yes.
But there is a problem there, because that's fine, but not if they don't feel safe doing it.
Yeah.
Not if they are struggling with it. Not if that nervous system is hijacking cognitive processes all the time. Not if they are already compromised through genetics, early trauma. They're already compromised through things like poor gut health, poor diet, physical pain, emotional pain, social pain. It's just the reality that we have to recognize, because the biggest challenge with a task approach, and if that task is to get that dog to conform to societal expectations, when the animal or the human can't do the task, somebody feels like they're to blame.
Yeah.
Either the dog's not good enough, the caregiver doesn't feel good enough, or even trainers who are stuck in tasks themselves get really caught up in this thing of I'm not good enough.
Yeah.
And it's because they're trying to push that up, that kind of rock uphill.
Yeah.
So there's a better middle ground to be found, I think, Caroline. And the general public, in my experience, actually working with the general public, also in my group, big chunk of my group are caregivers. I call them expert caregivers. They've done the train more, and it didn't help. And they've gone down the listen more route, and it has. They really get this stuff. I find the general public, when they're presented with this, they really get it. Because they don't want to be a flipping dog trainer anyway. They're like, oh, I get that. So if I do this, this, and this, that means okay, I'll get all that. I find it's other professionals who struggle a bit more with moving beyond an operant-only toolkit. And this isn't about anybody not getting rid of stuff. It's adding to. And actually, these things that we talked about Turid on before we come on air, and people like Sarah Fisher and all these wonderful people. For too long now, their voices, their outlooks have been seen as being add-ons to.
Yes.
Now we're realizing actually that is central to, and the other stuff is add-ons to, actually.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like, I read a lot of Alexandra Horowitz and also Temple Grandin. Absolutely and listening to all her stuff. It's okay. Temple Grandin, she also talks about people. She's autistic, and if anyone doesn't know, but she has done some groundbreaking work with a plethora of animals, just from how, because she sees in little pictures rather than whole stories, and she can really empathize with what's going on with the animals, and she's done a huge amount. So I love reading her stuff, but also you're a human psychologist, working, because our work is, we're out there to help dogs, but in order to help dogs, we need to help people and help people understand that it's a two-way conversation. We need to bridge that gap and just calm it all down again and not be little control freaks.
I think it's really interesting how many people that I talk to in my dog centre care group who come along, and I always, regardless of their profession or the topic, I always want to try and get a feel for them at the beginning and get them to share some of their story. And how often there are people who have experienced the fallout of societal expectational norms themselves. I know myself as a gay man, for sure, I can see that. It's interesting you mentioned Temple there being neurodivergent, because I find a lot of neurodivergent people, they experience that. A lot of people who have different varying abilities, they feel it because they know what it's like to try and have their beautiful, rich square peg pushed through some conformist round hole. So it does take a mindset shift. And Laura Donaldson and I did a workshop recently called Behaviour Matters, but Mindset Matters More. Because actually, like I say, perception really is everything. And we have to recognize with our clients that their perception of their dog and their dog's behavior and their perception of their relationship and that may be in need of some support in shifting a bit, because that's the key. You can show somebody a positive way of doing something, that's great. But if fundamentally their relationship is still based on me human, you dog, me master, you dog, then for the dog, nothing much changes.
Yeah.
And nothing much changes in that relationship ultimately. And that's problematic.
Yeah.
But as I say, most people I find, I've been doing this next year will be 15 years of Train Positive. I find the vast majority of colleagues, but having said that, I do have a skewed set of the population because I only work with aggression reactivity, and a lot of them are dogs that are quite a handful. And like you say, they've already tried a lot of other stuff. So I don't
Yeah.
have to do any persuasion. It's like, okay, it's because your dog's in pain, because your dog doesn't feel safe, because their dog's not getting relief, because the dog's trying to communicate to you. So they once they get that very quickly, they see the change very quickly. The beautiful thing, as we all know, if that dog feels different, they will behave differently. I invite people to think about their own behavior. How often do you think about your own behavior? Well, the answer is you don't. You just behave. And you will behave differently based on whether you're stressed, in pain, traumatized, but whatever it is. That's the point. And that's why I said earlier, there's only really two types of behavior: the behavior we judge in others, and we need to understand that, and the behavior we do ourselves.
Yeah.
You understand the metric of those two things, then you start to really get to what this whole conversation's about, really.
Yeah. No, it's like why I only do consultations in people's homes is because that's where both are more relaxed. That's where you see the natural behaviors coming through, and how you connect more. Because when a dog is and when people are, upset or angry or feeling discombobulated, you're not going to get the whole story of who that they are and who their dog is. And for someone to feel secure where they are is really important for learning, as you've been saying all along. So,
Yeah.
Andrew, yeah. Oh, it's been absolutely fascinating. I could talk for hours, but I know you've got lots of things to get on with. But because you deal with dogs who are reactive in nature mostly. Whereabouts in the country do you do your consultations?
So I'm based down in Devon. I'm based down in Devon. I do some virtual work. I'm not against virtual work, but because of the way I work, I want to feel that animal. I want to be there. I want to experience it. So, the best place for people to learn more stuff really is my Dog Centre Care group, Facebook group. It's a public group. We have regular guests in there, and the Dog Centre Care YouTube channel now has got getting on for 90 amazing conversations with some of the world leaders in looking at different strands of the emotional experience, whether that's neurobiology, pain, the learning experience, trauma, all these kind of things. And that's the place to kind of learn, to kind of immerse yourself, really. The most important thing, Caroline, is we're all individuals. I understand people's passion. I do on our side of the fence. But we have to think about what our purpose is. And if our purpose is to invite others to feel differently, we have to create safe spaces for that and not just point fingers and shame.
Yeah.
And that's what I want for my group. It's a chance to think, I wonder what that means for me. Then even our conversation today, it's not about telling people how they must or mustn't be with their dogs. It's just an invitation to think that bit resonated with me. What do I remember that thing about changing our relationship with feelings? What does that feeling mean to me? What do I need to think about there? And it's a beautiful thing. And that's what we should do all the time. This conversation is totally about both ends of the lead.
Yeah.
It is not a dog human thing. It's just a trying to live with others thing, I think. And especially the big thing I focus on a lot now with my new safe space service, which is mentoring and supervision for professionals, is finding some peace with self underneath all this. Because when you see your dog differently, you will see yourself differently, and recognize how much we're all a bit of a victim of being pushed through some kind of expectational norm.
Yeah. Andrew, this has been a massive eye opener, I hope, for many people who are listening in, watching in. And yeah, thank you so much for your very insightful take on everything human and dog.
Thank you
Thank
for having
you.
me.